Unknown date, 1958. If you find this, please, please get off the mountain. You may not make it, but if you do, take this diary and bring it to the Army Command, to the KGB, to anyone that will listen. They need to know what happened here. My heart sank when I heard the order co-signing me to level 5. It took a second to truly hit me, the reality slowly settling in my mind. Sergey. It had to be him. He had remembered my inquiry into Yuri's fate and had made sure, either from cruelty or from some twisted sense of justice, that I would share my friend's fate, whatever it was. But there was nothing I could do now. I left for level 5 immediately. The officer on guard duty at the tunnel from level 4 looked at my printed orders and smiled sadly. Wait a while in the side room, son. I have to double-check all level 5's postings with command. I'll just be a second. He waved vaguely to a small, unlit side room before walking over to a telephone set in the wall and dialing a number. I walked over into the side chamber resignedly. The room was dark, only lit by a thin sliver of light coming from the corridor outside and filled with dank air. There was another person walking inside, standing silently in the corner. As I approached, I could slowly make out more features. The man seemed familiar, even in the dark. It looked like... Yuri? Is that you? I asked incredulously. What are you doing here? Where have you been? Michael? Yuri asked. I stared at my friend in shock. He had changed horribly in the few short days we had been parted. Where before he was a healthy, well-built man and an undying smile on his face, he was now sallow and frowning. His eyes were dead and cold. Yes, Yuri, it's me. Are you alright? Have you been discharged from level 5? You've been... I didn't get another word out. Yuri darted forward, slamming into me, one forearm pinning my neck to the wall. He thrust his face in front of mine. Where are you going, Michael? He whispered in a sharp whisper. Have you been posted to level 5? Yes. Sergey sent me here as punishment for asking you about you. Yuri swore under his breath. Fuck. Listen to me, Michael. Don't listen to the screaming. Whatever you do, don't listen to it. If you can take it anymore, do whatever you have to. Just get out of there. Fake an illness, insult the officer, and get taken to the prison wing. Whatever you need. Just get out of there. There was a cough from the door. The officer stood there, uncertain as to what was happening. You have been cleared for level 5, Private Sudorov, he began tentatively. You backed away from me. Remember, Michael. Remember what I told you. Then he slipped out of the room and out of sight. Everything all right, Private? The officer asked. Something the matter? No, sir, I answered finally. Yuri's cryptic warning still swirling through my head. Just talking with my friend. I walked past him and to the thick iron door separating me from level 5. It slid open slowly, revealing the room I was to guard until I was relieved. And the screaming hit me. I couldn't pay attention to anything but that sound. It was all-encompassing, a cacophony of agony and sounds of several men being tortured beyond the limits of flesh and bone. I was no stranger to the sounds of pain after my time in the army, but none of it could compare to this. My eyes snapped to the source of the sound involuntarily. It was coming from the back of the massive room I had entered. The wall was solid rock, carved out of the mountain itself. A small opening yawned dark at its base, seemingly a cave entrance that was blocked off after several meters of pile of rubble and stone. A rockfall had sealed the cave shut. My heart swam, and I leaned on a wall for support. I couldn't think, couldn't focus on anything but the echoing sound of men in horrible, never-ending pain. I was drowning in a dark pool inside my mind, with nothing to grab onto. Don't listen to it. Yuri's words pulled me back into reality. I steeled myself. The screaming was still there, gnawing at my sanity, but I set myself against it. I would not fall to it. A man in a lab coat made a walk past me. I stepped in his path. He was a thin man, with a bald head and the stubble of several days on his chin. Comrade, what is that thing? I asked him, pointing to the cave entrance. Where does it lead? He looked at me in confusion. Do you not know? Didn't anyone tell you? This is my first time on level 5. I don't know anything about this place. Please, I need to know. The researcher looked around, as if checking if no one was watching us. Then he stepped in close to me. There used to be a huge cave system beneath this mountain, he said, his voice low. The local tribe would report strange noises coming out of it, and every now and then, people would disappear while on the mountain. So, we sent a small unit of 5 to check the tunnels. What happened to them? Only one of them ever made it out. They found him 3 days later, wandering the waste outside. He was beyond help, muttering to himself about the dark, blood, and things underneath his skin. It seemed the man blew a grenade while escaping and caused a rockfall that sealed the end of the caverns off. And the men inside? The men inside have been screaming ever since this place was found. Not a second of silence in 5 years. The man stepped away from me and hurried away, obviously not wishing to continue talking. I swallowed nervously, my mouth suddenly dry and my throat tight. "So glad you could join us today, Private," came a voice from next to me. I turned and came face to face with Commander Sergei Yonatov. The man was smiling slightly, but that unceasing anger was still simmering in his eyes. "Sir, yes, sir," I saluted, clenching my jaw in frustration. "Awaiting orders, sir." Sergei smiled. "There is not much to do for soldiers here, Private, except wait and remain vigilant. You will stand guard at that post until you are relieved." He smiled at a small niche set in one of the walls of the room, barely large enough for a man to stand in it. "Sir, yes, sir," I answered, gritting my teeth. I walked over to my post and stood to attention in it. The screaming was still hammering at my ears and tearing at my mind. There were no words to it, and no halt, not even for those screams to take a breath. There was no way it could have been so loud through the rock cutting off us from those men, if it even was a man. But somehow it was, drowning out everything else. I looked around the room to try and preoccupy myself with something else. It was a massive hallway, dozens of meters long and almost as many deep. There were so many niches similar to mine around the walls, and some occupied by dead-eyed soldiers, many others empty. The center of the room was filled with desks and elaborate equipment manned by researchers and scientists. I saw that almost all of them were wearing heavy hearing protection, drowning out the all-encompassing cacophony. They were working with complicated-looking electronic gear, the intent of which I couldn't begin to fathom. Right in front of the sealed cave entrance was a massive wheeled cannon. It was loaded and ready to fire, aiming straight at the pile of rubble separating us from what was inside there. Manning it were 5 soldiers, in uniforms I didn't recognize, all with heavy ear protection. We were expendable, but they were not. As my interest in surroundings waned, the screaming returned, stronger than before. I couldn't think of anything else but it. And the longer I listened, the more I became certain there was something more than human beneath it. An undertone no man's throat could ever utter. What was in there? It wasn't altogether human. Time began to lose all meaning, and how long was I standing there? Minutes, hours, days? I don't know. There was nothing to hold on to, nothing to compare the passage to, only the crying of the trapped men. I gained consciousness, confused as to what was happening and where I was. Only the walls of my post kept me upright as I leaned heavily on them. When I closed my eyes, I could still see that terrible cave and the barrier of rock between me and whatever was in there. I don't know how long I was on guard there before Yuri's words echoed in my thoughts. "If you can't take it anymore, do whatever you have to. Just get out of there. I wish to serve my country. I would gladly have laid down my life for it. But this was something I could not do. I had to get out of this room before I lost my mind." Slowly, almost theatrically, I keeled over and landed face down on the floor. I shut my eyes and went limp. "Medic!" someone yelled, barely audible over the screams. The thud of boots hammered the floor as several men ran to me and pushed me into my back. I kept my eyes shut, feigning unconsciousness. "We need to get him to the medical wing," came a voice I didn't recognize from somewhere above me. "He may go into shock. Not everyone can handle this for too long." I felt arms grab me and pulled me up. I was being dragged somewhere. I hoped it was towards the exit from level 5. The movement suddenly stopped. "No!" The voice was Sergei Yonatov's. It came from in front, from between me and the exit. Shit. "Sir, this man is unconscious. This place might have been too much for him. We need to get him to it." "No, comrade. This man is here as a disciplinary measure, and he will stay here till he awakens. Take him to the prison room and put him in a cell. He will be safe there till he awakens. Send for a medic to check him if you wish. But, sir, that's an order, Private. Understood, sir. I was being dragged away, but in a different direction now. Panic rose within me. Not only would I remain on level 5, but I would be trapped in a prison cell at the mercy of Commander Dyatlov and his twisted sense of justice. But if I awoke, he might guess I was only acting. If service on level 5 was his punishment for asking about Yuri, I didn't want to find out what the price for this would be. I was laid down on a cold stone slab. An iron door slammed shut somewhere nearby. Then there was silence, broken only by the wailing of level 5. Time began to slip past me again. Minutes blended into hours. There was only the sound from outside. Suddenly I was pulled back into reality. It took me a second to realize what had broken me out of my horrifying trance. Silence. Absolute silence. The screaming had stopped. There was a second of nothingness as the world drew its breath. Sirens wailed outside the door of my cell. The thump of boots echoed through the hall as soldiers took up positions. I leapt up, running over to the solid metal door of my room, beating on it with my fists. Let me out! Let me out, damn you all! There was no answer. Someone screamed in level 5, the same inhumane screech that had come before from within the cave, except now it was closer, more immediate, in the room outside. There was a gunshot, then another, and a whole firing squad, basically. The ground shook as the massive cannon I had seen discharged a single time. The screaming grew in volume as more men joined in, but never more than a handful. One cry would die down in a wet gurgle, only for another to take its place. I backed away from the door and fell to the ground, hands clenched on my ears. Something heavy hit the door. A red puddle began spreading from underneath it. There was a crash of steel from outside, the agonized wail of heavy doors being ripped off their axis, and the screaming grew distant, spreading upward through the facility. And silence fell on level 5. I have been here since then. I cannot open the cell door from inside. As far as I can tell, days have passed. Thirst and hunger torment me, but I have to hold on. In case I'm ever rescued, I have to warn someone. I have to warn them about what happened on level 5. Hey guys, it's Astro again. This was part 2 of the Dyatlov's Past Untold Stories. There will be 2 more parts coming out within this week or the next. If you like this story, tell me what you think about it in the comments below, or leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss any future content. Bye guys.